UN Secretary General Guterres called for immediate end to Iran-Israel war. UN keeps Israel on blacklist of grave child rights violators in conflict zones. And President Putin says Russia will expand a military cooperation with friendly nations. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres has called for an immediate end to the Iran-Israel war. UN Chief Antonio Guterres warned that continued escalation between Israel and Iran could lead to a wider disaster. Speaking during an emergency Security Council session, Guterres urged both sides to halt hostilities and prevent further regional destabilization. A senior UN official says the Iran-Israel conflict threatens regional stability and economic security. UN Under-Secretary General Rosemary DiCarlo warned that rising tensions between Iran and Israel are impacting the entire Middle East. Speaking at a Security Council session, she urged immediate efforts to de-escalate the conflict to avoid its spread. DiCarlo cautioned that the ongoing hostilities could have serious economic repercussions across the region if not contained. Russia's UN envoy has condemned Israel's actions, saying it sparked the war with Iran. Russian ambassador to the United Nations told the Security Council that Israel triggered the conflict with Iran by launching strikes on the eve of key nuclear negotiations. He said Israel's actions ignored ongoing U.S.-Iran talks and accused Tel Aviv of using nuclear weapons claims as a pretext, drawing parallels with the United States invasion of Iraq in 2003. The envoy added that Israel may be trying to distract global attention from its operations in Gaza and the West Bank. Moscow called for an immediate ceasefire. Iran's foreign minister has labeled Israeli attacks on nuclear facilities as grave war crimes. Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi has described Israel's latest strikes on Iranian nuclear facilities as grave war crimes and a blatant violation of international law. Araghchi revealed that Iran was scheduled to meet with U.S. officials on June 15th to finalize a potential diplomatic breakthrough regarding its nuclear program. He said the Israeli attacks sabotaged that process and delivered an unprecedented blow to the UN system and efforts for peaceful resolution. Iran has launched a new wave of missile attacks on Israel, striking central government buildings in Haifa. Iran fired a fresh barrage of missiles at Israel, including heavy-class projectiles, with one striking near the Sail Tower in Haifa. The tower serves as the northern administrative hub for Israeli government operations, housing key ministers, including Interior, Finance, and Justice. The strike marks a significant escalation in the ongoing conflict, targeting one of Israel's most important government facilities outside of Tel Aviv. No casualties have been confirmed as assessments of the damage continue. Crowds in Beirut and Sidon rallied in support of Iran amid the ongoing conflict with Israel. Demonstrators marched in Beirut's southern suburbs and the city of Sidon on Friday, showing support for Iran following Friday prayers. The rallies featured Hezbollah, Lebanese, and Iranian flags, along with chants against Israel and the United States. Protesters also carried images of Iran's supreme leader. The demonstrations come as Iran insists it will not resume nuclear negotiations while under Israeli attack, while European nations push for talks and the U.S. weighs its role in the widening conflict. The Grand Imam of Egypt's Al-Azhar has condemned Israeli aggression on Iran, warning of regional war. Grand Imam of Al-Azhar, Ahmed Al-Tayyib, has strongly denounced Israel's ongoing strikes on Iran, calling them reckless acts that risk triggering a full-scale regional war. He warned that such aggression, backed by international silence, threatens global security and serves only the interests of arms dealers. Al-Tayyib said continued inaction by the international community amounts to complicity, stressing that war can never be a path to peace. And for more analysis, we now move to Mark in our newsroom.
Thank you, Selma. Good evening, everyone. Yes, we're now joined from Cairo by Mr. Ali Atef, who is a researcher at the Egyptian Center for Strategic Studies. Welcome to Q News. So we've heard about the calls by Antonio Guterres. How effective is the UN's call for a ceasefire likely to be, given the current military and political realities on both sides?
Good evening. I think the UN calls at the moment to end the conflict between Iran and Israel might actually not be very feasible on the ground because of the Israeli persistence to continue the military operations against Iran. Israel is aiming at minimizing and undermining the Iranian defenses and capabilities, and on the other hand, Israel is also aiming at destroying or weakening the nuclear capabilities of Iran, so that they do not constitute a threat in the future. And I think Israel will continue these strikes against Iran, and Iran will respond to these strikes, and that's why I think the conflict will continue for the coming few days, and probably for a week or two, according to the Israeli statements. These UN calls might not actually be achieved on the ground.
Oh, okay. And what would you say might be the consequences of a prolonged Israel-Iran war for the broader Middle Eastern region?
The economic aspect regarding Israel, I don't think that Israel will be able to be resilient economically before the constant Iranian strikes, the employment sector and the trade exchange, as well as the manufacturing processes in Israel have been very significantly affected. There are daily casualties of billions of dollars because of the military operations with Iran, and there is also a very important aspect that the Israeli economy was suffering severely during the past few months due to the war waged on the Gaza Strip that has lasted now for more than 2 years, less than 2 years, pardon, and that's why I think that the Israeli economy will not be able to hold for any longer. And on the other hand, I think if the Iranian-Israeli conflict continues for the coming period, Iran might resort to procedures or strikes that will affect the world economy. Iran threatened that they might shut down the Hormuz Strait and the Arab Gulf before the world trade movement, which will affect the entire world and the international economy. We shall also remember that the Houthis' strikes in the Red Sea affected the navigation since November 2023. They have had a great and significant impact on the world economy, and this was reflected in Western and US reports regarding these casualties.
Well, of course, today we've had the meeting of foreign ministers in Geneva. Abbas Araghchi was there in attendance and ruled out talks between Iran and the United States and Israel whilst strikes are continuing. What diplomatic options do you think might remain? And do you think eventually Iran and the United States will get back to the negotiating table?
Iran so far is refusing to sit on the negotiation tables with the United States of America because they because Iran considers the United States as a partner in the military operations waged by Israel against Iran since the 13th of June. And the Iranian officials themselves stated in more than one platform during the past period that they can sit to negotiate again with the United States, provided that the Israeli strikes is I think that Iran and the Iranian government is ready to get back to the negotiation table if the war ends and stops now, because they are still targeting Iranian defenses and civilian sites and nuclear sites inside Iran. These Israeli strikes on Iran mainly focus on the capital Tehran itself, and I think that resuming the negotiations between Iran and the United States is a possibility at the moment.
And at the UN tonight, there's been several countries who have accused Israel of breaking international law when it comes to Israel striking nuclear sites. Do you think there's any chance that Israel might be held accountable?
I think if Israel was to be held accountable for their actions in Iran, they would have been also held accountable by the international community for what they did in the Gaza Strip for months. I think that Israel will not Israel will not be held accountable, or no pressures will be practiced against them at an international level. Israel has always been successful to evade punishment for their actions, and what has been done in the Gaza Strip is way worse than what they have done in Iran, and that's why I don't think it's possible for the upcoming period to see Israel held accountable.
Well, thank you very much for joining us here on the Bulletin. Mr. Ali Atef, a researcher at the Egyptian Center for Strategic Studies, joining us from Cairo. Thank you very much indeed. And let's go back to the studio with you, Selma. Selma.
Thank you, Mark, for conducting this analysis. And now for the latest developments in Gaza. The UN has kept Israel on its blacklist of grave child rights violators in conflict zones. The United Nations has maintained Israel's position on its blacklist for committing severe violations against children in conflict zones during 2024. In his latest report, UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres cited Israeli forces as responsible for killing and maiming children and for targeting schools and hospitals. The report calls for accountability, urging that Israel be held responsible for its actions against children in occupied territories. At least 42 Palestinians have been killed by Israeli gunfire across Gaza, according to medical sources. Palestinian medical authorities say Israeli forces opened fire in multiple areas of the Gaza Strip, killing 42 people since dawn. The deaths come as Israeli operations continue to target both civilians and humanitarian corridors. The toll is expected to rise as strikes intensify and aid access remains severely restricted. Rescue workers and medical teams are struggling to reach many of the wounded under continued shelling. With less than 20% of Gaza now livable, families are sheltering in bombed-out buildings as space and options run out. In Gaza City, dozens of displaced families are taking refuge inside the ruins of structurally unsound buildings damaged by Israeli airstrikes. With public shelters overwhelmed and streets unsafe, many say they have no alternative but to live amid rubble. The UN Agency for Palestinian Refugees reports at least 39 evacuation orders since March, forcing repeated displacements. As Israeli attacks continue and the humanitarian situation worsens, the already limited living space across the Strip continues to shrink. UNICEF says Gaza is facing a man-made drought as water networks collapse and children risk dying of thirst. The United Nations Children's Fund has warned that only 40% of Gaza's drinking water facilities remain functional, citing widespread infrastructure collapse. The agency says the Strip is now experiencing a man-made drought, with water production and access severely limited. Aid groups report increasing numbers of children suffering from dehydration and waterborne diseases, as Israeli strikes and siege conditions prevent repair efforts and block fuel and supply deliveries. Spain says it remains a committed NATO ally despite requesting exemption from higher defense spending. Spanish Defense Minister has reaffirmed her country's full commitment to NATO and the European Union a day after the Prime Minister sent a letter requesting exemption from the alliance's proposed 5% GDP defense spending target. Rebels said Spain is a serious and responsible ally. The letter sent to NATO Chief Mark Rutte asks for a more flexible approach or a complete exemption for Spain, raising questions about consensus ahead of the upcoming summit. Britain's parliament has passed a bill to legalize assisted dying, marking a major societal shift. In a landmark decision, the UK Parliament has voted in favour of legalising assisted dying, positioning Britain to join countries like Canada and Australia, along with select US states, in permitting the practice. The legislation is being hailed as the country's most significant social reform in decades, potentially offering terminally ill patients the legal right to end their lives under strict medical supervision. The bill will now move to the House of Lords for further consideration. President Vladimir Putin says Russia will expand military cooperation with friendly nations. Russian President Vladimir Putin announced plans to deepen military and technical cooperation with what he described as friendly countries. Speaking at the St. Petersburg International Economic Forum, Putin said Moscow would also accelerate efforts to modernize its own armed forces and military bases, equipping them with the latest weaponry and defense technologies. The remarks come amid ongoing geopolitical tensions and efforts by Russia to strengthen strategic alliances beyond the West. European Union ambassadors have approved a 1.5 billion euros plan to boost joint arms procurement and cut defense sector fragmentation. European Union member states reached a preliminary deal on the European Defense Industrial Programme aimed at supporting collaborative weapons procurement to lower costs and streamline production. The plan limits non-European Union components to 35% of the product, reinforcing bloc-wide manufacturing autonomy. The move comes amid growing pressure to enhance European defense coordination in response to regional and global security threats. Severe flooding has forced evacuations in parts of southern China, with more extreme rainfall expected in coming days. Rescue crews evacuated residents as torrential rains triggered widespread flooding across cities and towns in Hunan and Hubei provinces. State media reports say authorities remain on high alert, warning of further flash floods as the East Asia monsoon intensifies. The extreme weather has disrupted transportation and raised concerns over broader economic impacts in the world's second largest economy. Emergency response teams are working to contain damage as rainfall continues. China's first Legoland theme park opened for a soft launch Friday in Shanghai ahead of its grand debut next month. Legoland Shanghai welcomed early visitors on Friday, marking the soft opening of what is now the world's largest Legoland park. The site features over 75 rides and attractions, including a Lego mini-land that recreates iconic Chinese landmarks with more than 20 million bricks, built across 8 themed zones, including Ninjago, Lego, Friends, and Monkey Kid. The park will officially open to the public on July 5th. Barcelona's Casa Batlló has revealed its restored rear facade and courtyard after a €3.5 million renovation. Visitors on Thursday were treated to the newly restored back facade of Antoni Gaudi's iconic 1906 structure. The €3.5 million project revived original materials, including ceramics, ironwork, wood, and stucco, using traditional artisan techniques adapted for modern standards. The restoration also uncovered long-lost design elements, offering fresh insight into Gaudi's vision. The UNESCO World Heritage Site draws nearly 2 million visitors each year. A young French artist is turning beaches into temporary galleries by carving giant mandalas into the sand. The 20-year-old uses only a rake and measuring tools to transform France's Atlantic shoreline into intricate mandala artworks. Inspired by designs rooted in Hindu and Buddhist traditions, his creations merge with natural elements like seaweed and rocks. He began drawing in sand at age 14 and now practices beach art professionally, attracting curious visitors and sparking conversations about art, nature, and mindfulness. Nigeria has received 119 Benin bronzes from the Netherlands in a major restitution of looted cultural heritage. The Netherlands handed over 119 Benin bronzes to Nigeria, marking one of the largest returns of artifacts stolen during colonial rule. The bronzes were looted by British forces in 1897 and later acquired by Dutch museums. 4 pieces will go on display at the National Museum in Lagos, while the rest will be held at the Oba Oven Ramum storage facility in Benin City. The Dutch government called the return a step towards historical justice. China's mid-year shopping season has fueled demand for AI gadgets and domestic brands, with sales peaking ahead of June 20. Major e-commerce platforms in China have seen a surge in consumer spending during the country's mid-year promotional season, which runs through June 20. Over 70% of trending brands are Chinese, while searches for AI and heritage-related products have more than doubled year-on-year. In Beijing, immersive pop-up stores showcased robotic pets, AI-enabled home appliances, and futuristic gadgets, drawing families and tech enthusiasts alike. Retail analysts say the sales wave reflects a renewed appetite for innovation and local products. And that brings us to the end of our news bulletin. Here's what we've been covering. UN Secretary General Guterres calls for immediate end to Iran-Israel war. UN keeps Israel on blacklist of grave child rights violators in conflict zones. And President Putin says Russia will expand military cooperation with friendly nations. This concludes our news bulletin for the hour. Don't forget to follow Qnews on YouTube, Facebook, X, Instagram, and TikTok at QNewsEG to stay informed. Thank you for watching and stay tuned for more updates on Qnews.